Good morning and welcome to the Point. This past week, the Democratic National Convention was held, not in Milwaukee as planned, but all across the nation, remotely. The net result was more time for speakers and 4 nights of setting priorities for the coming campaign sprint. Former Vice President Joe Biden gave his acceptance speech on Thursday night, a speech he's been waiting to give for more than 30 years. Here's part of that address.
Good evening. Ella Baker, a giant of the civil rights movement, left us with this wisdom: give people light, and they will find the way. Give people light. Those are words for our time. The current president has cloaked American darkness for much too long. Too much anger, too much fear, too much division. Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I will be an ally of the light, not the darkness. It's time for us, for we the people, to come together. And make no mistake, united we can and will overcome this season of darkness in America. We'll choose hope over fear, facts over fiction, fairness over privilege. I'm a proud Democrat, and I'll be proud to carry the banner of our party into the general election. So it's with great honor and humility I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America. But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president. I'll work hard for those who didn't support me, as hard for them as I did for those who did vote for me. That's the job of a president, to represent all of us, not just our base or our party. This is not a partisan moment. This must be an American moment. It's a moment that calls for hope and light and love, hope for our future, light to see our way forward, and love for one another. America isn't just a collection of clashing interests of red states or blue states. We're so much bigger than that. We're so much better than that. You know, nearly a century ago, Franklin Roosevelt pledged a New Deal in a time of massive unemployment, uncertainty, and fear. Stricken by a disease, stricken by a virus, FDR insisted that he would recover and prevail, and he believed America could as well. And he did, and we can as well. This campaign isn't just about winning votes. It's about winning the heart and, yes, the soul of America. Winning it for the generous among us, not the selfish. Winning it for workers who keep this country going, not just the privileged few at the top. Winning it for those communities who have known the injustice of a knee on the neck. For all the young people who have known only America being rising inequity and shrinking opportunity. They deserve the experience of America's promise. They deserve to experience it in full. You know, no generation ever knows what history will ask of it. All we can ever know is whether we're ready when that moment arrives. And now history has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time. A perfect storm. The worst pandemic in over 100 years. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The most compelling call for racial justice since the 60s. And the undeniable realities and just the accelerating threats of climate change. So the question for us is simple. Are we ready? I believe we are. We must be. You know, all elections are important. We know in our bones this one is more consequential. As many have said, America is at an inflection point, a time of real peril, but also of extraordinary possibilities. We can choose a path of becoming angrier, less hopeful, more divided, a path of shadow and suspicion, or we can choose a different path and together take this chance to heal, to reform, to unite. A path of hope and light. This is a life-changing election. This will determine what America is going to look like for a long, long time. Character is on the ballot. Compassion is on the ballot. Decency, science, democracy, they're all on the ballot. Who we are as a nation, what we stand for, and most importantly, who we want to be, that's all on the ballot. And the choice could not be more clear. You know, one of the most important conversations I've had this entire campaign, it was with someone who was much too young to vote. I met with 6-year-old Gianna Floyd the day before her daddy, George Floyd, was laid to rest. She's an incredibly brave little girl. And I'll never forget it. When I leaned down to speak to her, she looked in my eyes and she said, and I quote, "Daddy changed the world. Daddy changed the world." Her words burrowed deep into my heart. Maybe George Floyd's murder was a breaking point. Maybe John Lewis's passing the inspiration. But however it's come to be, however it's happened, America's ready, in John's words, to lay down, quote, "the heavy burden of hate at last," and to end the hard work of rooting out our systemic racism. You know, American history tells us that it's been in our darkest moments that we've made our greatest progress, that we found the light. In this dark moment, I believe we're poised to make great progress again, that we can find the light once more. You know, many people have heard me say this, but I've always believed you can define America in one word: possibilities. The defining feature of America, everything is possible. That in America, everyone, and I mean everyone, should be given an opportunity to go as far as their dreams and God-given ability will take them. We can never lose that. In times as challenging as these, I believe there's only one way forward. As a united America, united in our pursuit of a more perfect union, united in our dreams of a better future for us and for our children, united in our determination to make the coming years bright. Are you ready? I believe we are. This is a great nation. We're a good and decent people. For Lord's sake, this is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been able to accomplish when we've done it together. The Irish poet Seamus Heaney once wrote, "History says, don't hope on this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme." This is our moment to make hope and history rhyme. With passion and purpose, let us begin, you and I together, one nation, under God, united in our love for America, united in our love for each other. For love is more powerful than hate, hope is more powerful than fear, and light is more powerful than dark. This is our moment, this is our mission. May history be able to say that the end of this chapter of American darkness began here, tonight, as love and hope and light join in the battle for the soul of the nation. And this is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together. I promise you. Thank you, and may God bless you, and may God protect our troops.
The night before Mr. Biden's pick for vice president, Senator Kamala Harris accepted the nomination. Here is part of that speech.
Every step of the way, I've been guided by the words I spoke from the first time I stood in a courtroom. Kamala Harris, for the people. I have fought for children and survivors of sexual assault. I fought against transnational criminal organizations. I took on the biggest banks and helped take down one of the biggest for-profit colleges. I know a predator when I see one. My mother taught me that service to others gives life purpose and meaning. And oh, how I wish she were here tonight, but I know she's looking down on me from above. I keep thinking about that 25-year-old Indian woman, all of 5 feet tall, who gave birth to me at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. On that day, she probably could have never imagined that I would be standing before you now and speaking these words. I accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States of America. I do so committed to the values she taught me, to the word that teaches me to walk by faith and not by sight, and to a vision passed on through generations of Americans, one that Joe Biden shares, a vision of our nation as a beloved community, where all are welcome, no matter what we look like, no matter where we come from, or who we love. A country where we may not agree on every detail, but we are united by the fundamental belief that every human being is of infinite worth, deserving of compassion, dignity, and respect. A country where we look out for one another, where we rise and fall as one, where we face our challenges and celebrate our triumphs together. Today, that country feels distant. Donald Trump's failure of leadership has cost lives and livelihoods. If you're a parent struggling with your child's remote learning, or you're a teacher struggling on the other side of that screen, you know what we're doing right now is not working. And we are a nation that is grieving the loss of life, the loss of jobs, the loss of opportunities, the loss of normalcy, and yes, the loss of certainty.
Michigan may once again be a pivotal battleground for this presidential election and was represented with a number of voices during the DNC's convention, including Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who delivered the first speech during the network coverage on Monday night. I talked to her about that. Governor, last night was the first night of the Democratic National Convention, a convention unlike any that we've seen in the past. You figured prominently in that. Talk about that moment and about your impression of the first night.
Oh, you know what? This is, like you said, a moment unlike anything we've been through before. Doing a convention virtually has maybe some benefits, but also certainly some challenges. I was grateful that I was asked to deliver a speech. I wanted to focus on unity. I wanted to focus on the people who've stayed on the front line throughout this crisis. And I wanted to focus on how important it is that we have leadership that is going to be guided by science and epidemiology, understanding that the health crisis begets the economic crisis, and so we got to do both.
You talk about a tricky business, and that is unity in this time. You talked about it from the convention standpoint. You've talked about all of Michigan trying to come together and do the things that you have prescribed, talking about mask wearing and social distancing. How hard is it, either as a party or as a governor of a state, to get people together in a time where there seems to be a good amount of separation, and not just separation, but people that have seem to have dug in on their positions?
Yeah, it's challenging. You know, there's no two ways about it. It's challenging. And I think the politicization of this public health crisis makes it a lot harder. We should be able to rally as a nation around saving one another's lives and keeping ourselves protected and saving our economy, frankly. And yet, because the Trump administration has made it so political, it's made it very difficult to do that. And that's challenging. And yet we know we've got to grit our teeth and keep doing the work. I was pleased to see John Kasich on the stage last night talking to Republicans about this moment in our nation's history. I know every 4 years, there's a tendency to say this is the most important election of our lifetime. And yet, I really believe that is the case this year. And perhaps this is one of the most important elections in our nation's history. Fundamentals like the post office, fundamentals like making sure that we've got tests for COVID-19, to ensure that we've got resources so our kids can get the education they need, even in the midst of all of this craziness. These are the fundamentals that we should be able to find some common ground on as a nation and as a state. And I remain ready to work with everyone who wants to do that. And I know that we are stronger as a state and as a nation when we remember we're Americans or we're Michiganders before we're partisans.
Next week, it will be the Republicans' turn as they hold their convention, and we will have coverage of that beginning Monday night. When we come back, a different kind of political discussion. That's next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Campaigns, particularly campaigns for president, can be very partisan and polarizing. That's just the nature of politics. But at a time when we will all be bombarded by a lot of "my candidate is better than your candidate," there's a group of U.S. House members that have a different message. 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans make up what they call the Problem Solvers Caucus. I recently sat down with 3 members of the group, 2 from Michigan, Democrat Debbie Dingell and Republican Fred Upton, plus Republican Congressman Tom Reed of New York, the caucus co-chair, to talk about the group and what they hope to achieve. Mr. Chairman, I want to start with you. Just talk to me a little bit about this caucus, unique in its nature, an even makeup of Republicans and Democrats, and you have taken on some significant issues trying to find common ground where common ground can be found. How does that happen?
Well, it's great to be with you first, Rick, here in Michigan with 2 great colleagues, Debbie Dingell and obviously Fred Upton, to show support for the Problem Solvers Caucus. And these are great, 2 great leaders, and they represent what we are in the Problem Solvers Caucus. We're proud Republicans, we're proud Democrats, but at the heart, we're pragmatic. We want to get things done for the American people. And what we have done with this caucus is to officially bring together 25 Republicans, 25 Democrats who are willing to stay in the room to find common ground. And we have done it on some of the hardest issues that have faced this nation, and we're going to continue to do it.
Congresswoman, we are a few blocks away from the Museum of Gerald R. Ford, who as a member of Congress was certainly a partisan, but also was able to find common ground working across the aisle. How difficult is it, and how difficult is it for you to be a part of this group with some of your own Democratic caucus who might not see eye to eye with that kind of cooperation?
So, Rick, first of all, it's good to be with you and to welcome Tom to Michigan. And I'm very proud to be sitting here. Many people may not know it, but I'm a member of the board of the Gerald Ford Library and the Ford School at the University of Michigan, both boards, and very proud of it. Jerry Ford and my husband were good, close friends, and they worked together. And when I married John, Betty Ford took me under her wing and just helped me on so many different things. I can't tell you, and the kids continue to be wonderful friends. And they brought different perspectives, they had different ideas, but they probably agreed on more than they disagreed. And they knew that you could go into a room and have an intense exchange of ideas, but you left that as friends. And they were Americans first. They found that common ground. They did what was right for the country. They didn't do what they did because they were a Republican or a Democrat. They did what they did because it was right for this country. And I think that's what the 3 of us here do, and what we're trying to do with our colleagues is to bring that respect and civility back that used to be there. And we need to bring it back or this country's in trouble.
When we talk about that kind of experience, and we talk about your experience in Washington going back to the Reagan administration, how much different do things look on Capitol Hill today than when you were there as a staffer? And how do you get back to what the Congresswoman was talking about, that kind of civility?
Well, I'll confess, I think we all would. It's a lot different than it was way back when. You know, maybe a lot of reasons, maybe because of the money you have to raise to win. Easily now it's $2 to $5 million for folks to raise. That's a lot. You don't have maybe the relationships, particularly with the newer members. All of us pretty much go home every weekend, so you're not there, kids or others, spouses. But one of the things that the problem solvers did, and we identified this early, how do we get through this partisan crap? we had to change the rules, and we did. Credit to the Democrats as well as the Republicans, but they were in the hot seat because they took the majority 2 years ago. They said, we're not going to vote for the speaker, and Republicans would have done the same thing, unless we change the rules to make this more bipartisanship. Co-sponsorships count, working together, having a seat at the table with the speaker and others. We're routinely asked for our opinion. And our block of 50 votes, that makes a difference. The White House has reached out to us. I mean, that's how, frankly, we ended the 35-day shutdown last year. And we were called, many of us, into the Situation Room, both Republicans and Democrats. And we walked the president through on how we could get through this. And you know what? The next day it happened. We worked on immigration reform. We worked on a whole number of different things. We're working on civil justice issues. I've been working with Karen Bass, the head of the Congressional Black Caucus. We're very close to getting something done. White House reached out to us, in this next COVID package. What is it? It ought to be easy what we ought to be doing, and it ought to be out of this partisan gridlock. And we're going to be a key, I think, in the door to try and get that thing done.
We had a discussion, you were having the discussion, and I was kind of in your orbit and listening, but you're all hearing a lot about the post office and what's happening with the United States Postal Service. How do you as a group, or do you as a group, weigh in on that? And how do you try to, A, guarantee a efficient and inexpensive delivery of parcels, particularly to remote areas and rural areas that may not have access to other types of mail service? And how do you also make sure it's funded and make sure it's reliable all at the same time?
Well, it's actually interesting because the Postal Service is when Fred was talking about the rules change, one of the things that we got through on that rules change was the relief to the Postal Service on a bill that went through the House in a huge bipartisan basis to relieve the pension obligation that the Postal Service has a unique overfunding requirement that has been put on it. And it's causing huge fiscal problems to the Postal Service. So we got that out of the House on that rule reform because of the Problem Solvers Caucus effort. Now going forward, what we're dealing with the postal issue is obviously it's getting caught up in election politics. And there's always a concern about election integrity, but this is not about that, in my humble opinion. In my opinion, what the Postal Service is about is making sure that the mail continues to flow, making sure that the mail has the access to the resources to make sure that it can deliver. It's in the Constitution. I mean, the Postal Service is there, and we need to make sure we stand with it. As a Republican, I support it. Now, the concern about universal mail-in ballot, that's different than absentee ballot. And the security of the election should be something we all agree should be something that we're concerned about. And if anybody thinks they can play games with an American election, they should understand you're going to jail if you do that. But at the end of the day, people should have access to ballots. They should have access to mail, because in a COVID-19 situation, there are risks that have to be addressed. And using the mail system, if people so choose to do that, that's their right to so elect to do that.
Our interview took place outside, socially distanced in downtown Grand Rapids. And you will see the second half of our interview in next week's show, along with a recap of the Republican convention. I'll be right back with the final thought next. To the point. Starting tomorrow, the Republicans will hold their convention, renominating Donald Trump and Mike Pence for president and vice president. When their convention ends, the election will be 67 days away. But by the time the polls open, the outcome in some states with early voting, like Michigan now has, may already have been determined. So the election is now. I hope you'll join me every Sunday morning as we try to keep track of it all. To the point.